Hey, welcome to Stories from Real Working Caregivers. I'm Zach.
And I'm Selma.
Hey, Selma, how are you?
I am great. How are you,
Uh,
Zach?
I'm excited. I've got a friend as well as an incredible HR leader that we are going to join us today. And hold on to your hats, buckle your seatbelts. This is going to be a hell of a conversation. First of all, shout out to Lori Rudiman, who introduced me to this incredible fella. So thank you, Lori. So let's bring him right on. Hello, Vadim Lieberman.
Hello, Zach. Hi, Selma.
Hi, Vadim. How are you?
Um, you know, I'm good. I'm miserable. I'm everything at once.
You're a caregiver.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's all part of the deal.
And we're
Yeah.
going to get right into that, Selma. Before we do that, though, here's a question I don't think I've ever asked Vadim. So I want to ask you, buddy, why are you known as the Liberace of HR?
I don't even know myself. I just thought it sounded good. I mean, listen, I play piano. I like a good sequin. There's a little flamboyance there, and I like to inject some fun into HR like it's possible. And I find that all the HR ladies with their pearls and cardigans and they love it. So, it
I
works. It works.
love it. I love it. All right, well, let's get right into it. I've been really, really excited to speak with you. We both, Selma and I, love all the guests that we've had here in this series. They really give it to us straight. They're vulnerable, but you in particular are very vulnerable and give it straight on LinkedIn, one of the largest platforms when it comes to the professional world. And I really, really love that because we are encouraging more and more caregivers to be vulnerable, especially on LinkedIn. Like put it in your profile or put your skill sets that you use when you're a caregiver on there. Tell your caregiver story. So let's get right to your caregiver story. If you could start with that, I'm very familiar with it, but please share with our audience what is your caregiver journey look like?
Yeah, well, so I am a caregiver to my mom. My mom is now 75, but I took her first to a neurologist back in 2018, because she was exhibiting memory issues. And one thing led to another. And eventually, she got an official diagnosis, but she developed Alzheimer's disease, which is now full-blown dementia. At this point, my mom is on hospice care for well over a year now. So it's been a really rough journey, as any caregiver, particularly with Alzheimer's and dementia, will tell you. There's a lot of unpredictability. It's just really tough when you become a parent to your parent. It's the kind of thing where it doesn't really happen. You don't really think about it until it happens to you. And it happened to me. It happened to my mom. And it's just been a really tough journey managing that, especially when I was working, balancing that with work. And yeah, it's hard.
I want to quote you because I don't want to mess up this quote, but I did pull something that you have written many times, and I just want to ask you about this because this is really telling based on what you just shared. You shared, my mother's died of Alzheimer's disease. As I've had to become a parent to my parent, as you just said, dressing and bathing and feeding and toileting her, the dementia hasn't just been killing her; it continues to kill me, at least emotionally. Can you say more about that, Vadim?
Yeah, I mean, I think that says a lot right there. But, you know, if there's any silver lining to this, any, it's that my mom is the one who's not fully aware of her disease, which is good. But obviously I am. And she and I have always been extremely close. I mean, this is my best friend. It's not just my mom, very close. So every single day, it just killed me inside when she would when she started to forget me. She has no idea who I am at this point too. And so what happens is, particularly with dementia, is that you're constantly in this state of grief, anticipatory grief. It's a kind of in-between phase where the person is alive, but in so many of the most important ways, my mom has died in the most important ways that really matter.
Mm.
This is obviously still my mom physically, but there's been a death, but it's not the kind of death that we as a society know how to deal with. Not in the workplace, not outside the workplace, and how to manage that. And so when I say that it's been, killing me, that's exactly what I mean. It was emotionally apocalyptic for me, really. And it
Hmm.
still is.
Wow. So you talked about Vadim struggling with balancing the work responsibilities and caring for your mom. I was just wondering, did you share with anyone at work what you were going through and how did your care experience impact your work experience?
It made me a really shitty worker, honestly. I feel. I did share what was going on because I'm generally an open book to begin with.
Mm,
I shared with my coworkers, I shared with my boss. I was at I was at one company when my mom, started developing more symptoms and the disease was progressing. And then I got another job and I shared with my boss there too. And my coworkers, my managers were supportive as they could be within the context of a workplace. But as for my own work and what that felt like, it was just really hard to be able to juggle workplace responsibilities with caregiving responsibilities. It's really cliche to say that, balancing work and caregiving, but
mhm,
it's cliched for a reason because it's true. And both jobs were largely like 98% remote. And I did my best that I could, but at the end of the day, there were times when I couldn't get work done. There were times when I lied about getting work done. There were times when I just
mm,
didn't do work, and nobody knew because I had to deal with issues relating to my mom, or I just wasn't in a mental space to do work. I remember being on one call in particular, um, probably within a year of my mom's diagnosis, and it was a really important meeting. And I don't remember at this point what I just found out about her disease or where she was or something like that. But I was just so emotionally overcome. I just left in the middle of the call, left in the middle of the call. And my coworkers understood. But that said, as much as your coworkers and your boss can understand what you're going through and make certain accommodations, at the end of the day, this is a no-win situation for everyone involved. And I struggled for many years to caregive, to work. But I do want to say one thing actually about this that is super important because I think that what often gets overlooked, and I'll mention this in a second, is I've been talking about balancing work and caregiving, and that is a struggle in itself. But I would say that for me, the bigger struggle was trying to manage work or balance work, not with caregiving per se, but with grief.
mm.
That's a whole different issue. Now we're talking an emotional aspect to it. And that to me it just proved for me to be impossible. And I eventually left the workforce because of that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. My mom had dementia as well. And the fact that you said your mom's already passed away and you're grieving up until she physically does pass away. And that's one of the concepts that people don't get. It's like the grief is there when you wake up, is there when you go to sleep, because you know that person has already left and you're grieving that individual, but that body is still there. So it's really a difficult situation. Along those lines, you mentioned in a LinkedIn post a couple years ago, you talked about when a nightmare kills a dream job. And you talk about how there's no such thing as a dream job, basically, when you're a caregiver. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think my exact line was something like there's no such thing as a dream job, but when your life is a nightmare.
Yeah.
you know? And I was. When I left work, I felt like I was at the top of my game. I really loved my job, well, like most of it, you know? And, but ultimately, like I said, it might have been a dream job for me, but because of everything that was going on in my personal life, there was no way for me to really live that dream. And again, it goes back to what I was mentioning a moment ago about the emotional aspects and the grief. The thing is that I think that there's I don't know if it's a misconception or a false expectation or wrong expectation, certainly, that when people who are going through grief like this, particularly what involves caregiving as well, that you can sort of compartmentalize different things, right? Okay, well, you've dealt with your mom and now you can do work, right? You go from
Mhm.
one to the other, but that's not the reality. Physically, it might be, right? Because you're working, but then you go tend to my mom and do what I need to. But the headspace,
Yeah.
Mm,
right? The grief, the caregiving, the worry, it never turns off. It is always there. And I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I do think I speak certainly for myself and a lot of people when I say that what matters more than work is your loved one. And that's always going to take precedence. And so then there's guilt involved with that too, because oh God, like I gotta work and but what about her? And am I choosing work over my mom? And
Mhm.
like I just dealt with all of that. And luckily I was, like I mentioned a second ago, able to leave the workforce financially. I mean, I'm not rich,
Mhm.
but like I'm okay. But I fully recognize that most people cannot do that. They have kids to support, they have a lifestyle, whatever that is, to support. They might have to financially still make enough money to support their loved one who they're caregiving for. So I get that. And my heart goes out, especially to those people, because looking back, I don't know how I would be able to go through what I'm going through right now and work. I, I mean, if I had to, I would. But again, I would be a pretty shitty employee.
mm. God, can't say enough how much we appreciate your honesty,
Yeah.
Vadim. That's what I've been looking forward to. And I got to say, Selma and I've been doing this for quite some time. This is probably the first time, I don't know about you, Selma, but I've heard somebody say, I left my job due to grief
Yeah.
of my caregiving role. Of what you're dealing with in your caregiver role. It's the first time I've ever heard that. I've heard of people taking time off for grief. I've heard all this,
Yeah.
but I've never heard that. And I got to say, your mother is blessed to have you. You're blessed to have your mom. What's mom's name?
Frida, Frida.
Rita.
Yeah.
Rita.
A lot of people will tell me like, your mom is lucky to have you. And I am always quick. Zach, I think you may have said that to me once too. And I'm always quick to correct people. I'm like, no, my mom
Guilty.
is, yeah, my mom is not lucky to have me. I am lucky to have had her and still have her as a mom.
Yes.
Yeah.
I take care of her to the extent that I do, not because she's lucky, but because she raised me that way.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
Rita's beaming right now and smiling says, he's such a good boy. I love it. I love it. This might be a silly question because I got a feeling you were born a caregiver, though those are arguments, whether it's genetic or not. But how has caregiving changed you?
Um, So I am, it's funny when you said born a caregiver. I am, or I was not, right? So this is how it changed me. I feel like prior to my mom getting this sick and me having to take care of her, I was not somebody who, I'm not saying I lacked empathy, but I was not somebody who was extremely empathetic, let's say. I would say that's the biggest change. I am much more empathetic to other people's situations and their struggles, and not just with caregiving, but just in life in general. And we know we all have stuff that we deal with, to an extent that I know that I wasn't before. Um, I feel things. I can kind of feel how other people might feel that I didn't before. So again, maybe that's like another silver lining. But I mean, truthfully, I know that a lot of people, and I'm not one of them actually, a lot of people will talk about these are the lessons I've learned from my mom's disease and caregiving for her. You know what? I don't need any of these lessons. I'm not a stronger person because of it. I absolutely not. I am weaker because of it, right? That's the truth. And I know it's like, we're not supposed to say that because this is supposed to make you stronger and look at all the skills and resilience that you're building. I don't need any of that. I didn't want any of that. I still don't want any of that. But this is what I've been dealt. And, I just try and make the most of it, less so for me, but more so for her.
I appreciate that so much. I,
Yeah.
I really do. And I get it about the empathy piece. I remember the first time I ever cried publicly was on a plane, and I just had a baby daughter, and all of a sudden I'm like, "Why am I crying? I don't understand this." And I just
Yeah.
like I don't know, something about that baby girl just changed me, you know, it's just it was always there. It maybe just came out, but I appreciate that. But if I could force you to at least name maybe two skills, and remember, this is for the benefit of all those who are reading or watching, that we encourage, Selma and I encourage people to put this on your resume if you've been out of the workforce for a while. Put down, these are incredible real skill sets, like you said, resilience and time management. But if you were to name one or two that you didn't know you have besides empathy, what would you say?
Well, I
Because
would
they're
say,
all, go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say resilience is probably the strongest one. To be able to bounce back and move forward because you just don't have a choice,
So,
right? Or not a
Mm,
viable choice, let's say. I would say that is the number one skill that I probably uh, have developed from this.
yeah.
I don't know if empathy is a skill, but to the extent that you can better connect with other people over the struggles that they face, and they don't have to be personal emotional struggles, like within the context of work. It could be maybe you're struggling with a project. Well, let me help you. Let's understand what you're going through with that, because there is still an emotional component to that, with work, right?
Yeah.
So I would say those are probably the two biggest skills that I've acquired, I guess.
Yeah. Thanks.
yeah. So, from your experience, Vadim, your care experience beginning with the diagnosis of your mom through to the grief that you experienced during this whole process to her hospice now situation, what do you think employers misunderstand the most when caregivers are going through the whole stages of the process, and what do you think they can do better?
Yeah, I think that it goes back to what I said before, that I think there's an expectation that caregiving and work are just compartmentalized, you know?
Hmm.
And the reality is for caregivers, and it doesn't necessarily have to be, caregiving for a parent who's dying. It could be just your child care and raising your child. And especially if you have a child with special needs or is sick and all of that, I think that there is this expectation that you can separate the two, right?
Hmm.
And the reality is that mentally you can't. I can't. And I suspect 90 whatever percent of people, my unofficial research says that most people cannot. And so I think that it's important, number one, just to realize that, you know, I know again, this is cliche, the whole bringing your whole self to work. But these are the things that you do bring to work. You may not express them, maybe the cult, and that's another piece around culture, right? But I think that a lot of times workers, employees don't necessarily feel comfortable talking about that because they worry they're going to be judged. They worry about that promotion. They worry about getting into trouble with their boss, and we're talking white collar stuff here. Now, in other jobs, certainly it's even more of a struggle, perhaps if you're in a blue collar, maybe you work, in retail and you have shifts to do and you need to make money, you know, and you can't just miss a shift, right? So I think that there's a lot of stress that people carry and grief and stress and all of those emotions that people carry that maybe isn't fully recognized by more senior leaders in an organization. So I think that said, certainly. There are policies that can be enacted, and more and more companies are getting better at it in terms of providing more time off, paid time, and paid, by the way, paid time off, uh,
Hmm.
and just maybe having, employee affinity groups around this and all of that. But, the policy is one piece. You can have all the policies, all the right policies in the world, but if the culture isn't there to enable you or to encourage you to, take part in those policies, they're kind of useless. And one thing that comes to mind, because I live in New York State, we have an amazing paid family leave program. And I took it. And I've written about this too. This was, by the way, this is every employee's right to take.
Mhm.
assuming you fill the requirements. But I probably should have taken it much sooner than I did. And the reason I didn't take it is because I was really nervous how it would impact me, how it would impact my coworkers at work. I was
Mhm.
scared, quite frankly. I was nervous. I was
Yeah.
nervous how my boss would react to it. I knew he wouldn't fire me. He can't. But because that would be retaliation. But, you know, um, and eventually I just pulled that band-aid off and I took that leave. And I think it's incumbent upon companies to really inform employees of those policies. It's important to highlight individuals who, assuming the individual is comfortable, who have t taken advantage of those policies, to show like, hey, we have this as a company, and you not only can take it, but maybe you should you know, it's a benefit. Um,
Mhm.
I mean, it starts there. I think the unfortunate thing, though, that happens is that so often companies may not even have these policies. I'm thinking of bereavement leave specifically.
Yeah.
And I think of, and I've talked about this before, Facebook. Um, when Facebook's former CMO, when her husband died, right? She was in tremendous grief. And it was only after that that Facebook changed its bereavement policy to be way more generous than the standard 3 to 5 days.
Yes.
And of course, it
Yeah.
depends. Is it your mom? Is it your aunt? Is it your son? Is it
Yes.
all that nonsense? But it shouldn't have to take the death of a spouse of a C-suite member to have a good policy, you know.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you
Well
so
said.
much. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, well said.
Yeah.
Well said. And that's a great example that's been brought to us before. Um, I want to talk a little bit about your Disrupt HR talks. If for those of you out there who have not seen one of Vadim's Disrupt HR talk, you must. We'll put links to at least two of them that I absolutely love. One on grief, one on authenticity is a lie. Well, I don't know where you come up with this stuff, but in with that as a background as to how real you are, when you do these talks, and you also have just a rich HR background, and you've written and you've provided content, you really know a lot about HR. You mentioned it before, culture and policy. A lot of times those do clash, but there is probably a way to try to harmonize these things, figure out a way to bring these two together because you do need policy, but you do need culture. And maybe just let's use bereavement, grief as a backdrop, since that was one of your talks. How what would you suggest in terms of where you can bring policy and culture together and make it work so that we could be more supportive for people that are grieving?
For starters, when you have leaders who are going through caregiving issues and grief issues, have them actually take that
Mhm.
time off. Let them be an example to other
Yeah.
employees. Because if you see leaders aren't taking those policies, if you know, for example, that you have a senior leader who, I don't know, child died or whatever, and that leader isn't accessing the work policy or that leader isn't taking time off because, got to get the work done, right? That's going to set the tone. So I think number one, have leaders be that example for their employees. But at the same time, it really is just as simple as encouraging people in the workforce to talk about these issues.
Mm,
You know, um, this is also perhaps cliche to say, but like, we throw baby showers at work. We have celebrate birthdays at work because those are fun, those are nice, those are
Yeah.
feel good things to talk about, right? And I'm not saying we shouldn't, but it's almost taboo to have a gathering of people at work, related to, again, caregiving, right? Or some of the darker, shall we say, struggles that people might face. And there shouldn't be any difference.
Yeah.
The thing is, and I've said this in one of my Disrupt HR talks, there's this lie that gets, thrown out a lot that mental health is health, and I believe it is. And maybe a lot of companies and leaders believe it is too, but they don't act it, right?
mm,
And it's sort of this lie that gets told because it gets told repeatedly so many times that maybe people have deluded themselves into believing this at work. But it's not true unless it's truly actualized at work. or realized at work, Um, and I've said this in my Disrupt talk, like if I were in a car accident, if my mom were in a car accident, nobody would expect me to come back to work until, if it was me, until I was physically able, and even her, right? Until certain physical elements of that were kind
Mhm.
of addressed, right? But when it's more of a, emotional state one's in, you can go back to work the next day. Just deal with it. Just push through it, right? Nobody expects you to push through the physical stuff at work as much as the mental stuff. And I think that that needs to be better addressed and talked about. And again, with leaders setting the right example.
Oh man, I just love that. And when you're
Yeah.
talking about baby showers, we got to do a shout out to Jen Chan, who's created a whole concept around senior showers. So, like you're saying, Vadim, it's like against culture for somebody to come to work and show pictures of bed sores of their parent, like, hey, look what I did this weekend, right? Versus bringing pictures of the baby shower, right? But
Yeah.
senior shower, Jen Chan. I hope you're really moving forward with that concept and idea. Just one last follow up question to that, Vadim. Marching orders to any HR leaders that you have here. What kind of dose of inspiration would you give them if they haven't even thought about this stuff and they want to do something tomorrow? What would you say to them?
I would say, first of all, even if you do not realize it, you have coworkers and colleagues who are really going through tough times. And it could be caregiving, like I said, for their young ones. It could be for their elderly parents. It's often both, right? The sandwich generation, all of that. It's often both. So whether you realize or not, your people are struggling. You have plenty of people who are struggling. And
Mhm.
if there aren't any of those stories at work, it's not because they're not struggling, it's because the culture is not there to be able to talk about that, right? And so I would say create that space to do that. Um, during lunchtime, have lunch and learns, have workplace support groups. You will be, as a leader, surprised pleasantly, I believe, at how many people will feel a sense of relief to be able to talk about this with their other coworkers. And sure, uh, to some extent, probably some colleagues already do that on an informal basis. But when you actually create that space, it says that you as a company care about this. And that's where it starts. That's not where it ends. But I feel like that's a pretty easy, low-hanging fruit there to start with. And why not? You know?
Yeah.
That would be not my number one suggestion. That's the kind of thing where you can do tomorrow and it's free, right? That is like every executive's favorite four-letter F word. It's free, you know? So start with that.
Bravo,
So
bravo.
I'm going to ask you a question, Vadim, that we typically ask all our guests at the end of our talk, and that is before you started your care journey with your mom, before you were had to dive into this whole process of caring, what would you, looking back, what would you advise that Vadim, and what would you do differently?
Yeah, I've actually thought about this question for at least a couple of years now, you know, and it has nothing to do with work, you know, and it might be a bit specific to having a loved one with dementia, but I don't think necessarily limited to that. I know that when earlier in my mom's disease, when she was going to more doctors and and the doctors were recommending doing certain memory exercises with her and just all kinds of, for lack of a better word, interventions. It's not quite an
Mhm.
intervention because, dementia only goes one way. Uh,
Yeah.
I was really hyper focused on doing that. I would walk with my mom outside. We would take walks here in the suburbs, and I would, Mom, let's count, backwards like a hunt, because this is one of the exercises. 100 minus 7, right? 93. What's 93 minus 7? What's that minus 7? To kind of train her brain. And, predictably, every time she'd get like the first couple correct, and then she'd struggle. She'd struggle and she would feel bad, and I would feel frustrated because I actually have no patience. By the way, You asked a little bit ago, what is another skill? Patience. Patience is what I've learned. I don't even think I'm fully there yet, but um, and I just wouldn't have the patience. And I would snap at her. And it was just a terrible experience overall. And in the name of what? Trying to help her.
Yeah.
And it's not because I was in denial. Like I'm actually a very logical person. I knew exactly the situation. I understood it completely, but I'm trying to delay things. I'm trying to do what I think is best for her. And I was just so hyper focused on treating my mom's symptoms, I guess, in a way,
Yeah.
that I lost track of what really matters, which is just spending
Yeah.
quality time with her. And it
Yes.
sucks because I don't get a do-over, and it sucks because I realized that too late.
Yeah.
That's me. And my hope is just for other people. I've told people this, like, don't hyper focus on that. Don't get annoyed by stupid shit that doesn't actually matter in the end. I promise you, in the end, all that matters is you're spending quality time. Just
Yeah.
walk, just hold the person's hand, walk outside. Don't even talk if you don't want to. But, I think so often human nature is to get caught up and we always want to try and fix something. We always want to try and
Yeah.
get better.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is not fixable. So, that's the main thing that probably, I would tell my earlier self in my mom's journey, like, hey, focus on what really matters. And I will also say this, my mom actually said the same thing. At one point, I had this delusion of, let's get my mom to move from the suburbs into the city to be closer to me. Thank God that never happened for various reasons. But I remember one day we spent some time with a real estate agent walking around, looking at apartments. Um, and then we got back to my apartment, and the broker was like, okay, well, let's go over some of the choices. My mom didn't remember one apartment
Wow.
from another. And I was getting annoyed. I'm like, well, how the hell are we supposed to pick a place if you and I just drove myself crazy. By the way, this is in front of the broker too, right?
Oh, wow.
And in retrospect, I'm like, God, I was like embarrassed for myself for that. But that's how intensely this affected me.
Yeah.
And the broker left, and I was still I wasn't yelling at my mom at that point, not that I haven't yelled, but I just kept going on and on about it, and she just stopped me and she's like, listen, when me being my mom, when me and um, my sister and my aunt when they were taking care of their father, right? My grandfather, many years ago, I never met him. He died earlier, of Parkinson's, actually.
Mm.
My mom said we would get upset all the time too, and we would get frustrated. And their mom, my grandmother, told them, like, girls, this isn't what matters. None of this stuff matters. And so in this case, the apartment stuff, counting backwards, all of that none of that
Yeah.
matters. And so I just remember that hitting me in that moment so hard. I, I made up a lie. I'm like, I got to go to CVS. I forgot I got a prescription to pick up. It's a lie. I just need to get out of the apartment. I went to this park. It was at night, and I was crying hysterically. I mean, it was public, but nobody saw. But I called up my friend, just sobbing like hysterically. And so that moment kind of crystallized for me what, the question that you just asked about what I would tell my earlier self. None of that matters. All that matters is love, which is feels like some kind of like movie, right? But
Are you,
it's
are you,
it's
are you
it's,
trying to make me cry, man? Don't do
it's I
stop.
was trying. I'm trying not to cry, but
Oh my gosh.
it's true. But it's true.
Oh,
And what really sucks is that when I say it's too late, in many ways it is. I mean, now I am different with her, but now is a point where I can't enjoy her and vice versa, the way that
Yeah.
we could have
Yeah.
enjoyed each other back
Yeah.
then. And that time is gone and that's it.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
and
Wow.
yeah. So
man, I gotta tell you, just like every
Amazing.
time I hang out with you, we're both right in one respect. One, I'm right that you are not going to disappoint us today. You really delivered. And two, you are right. You are a lucky dude that Rita's in your life. Look at you. Look at you, man. I just can't thank you enough for today. I really can't.
Absolutely. Yeah.
no, thank you both. I mean, this is I just like we were talking about, I think that caregiving and the grief side of caregiving and the emotional labor aspects of caregiving do not get addressed enough.
Yeah.
Um, because you can hire people to help with caregiving. I certainly have, right? My mom has the most amazing caregivers. Um, and you can throw money at issues and that's important. Money matters a lot. But when it comes to the emotional aspects, the grief, there's no amount of outside help. There's no amount of money that's going to help you. You can help you. And to the extent that your workplace can help you, like we discussed before, there's a role there too.
Vadim,
Wow,
thank you so much, man. Oh, go ahead, Selma.
that sounds like a great blog topic. Staying
He
focused on what matters,
he's got
focusing
to
on
write
the
a book.
love. That, yeah, you gotta,
We
that's
keep telling
great.
him that. Everyone's telling him that. You got to write a book. We're going to be first in line to get
Yeah.
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you know what? You know what? I will be the first to say that the worst symptom, I've said this before, the worst symptom of my mom's disease is that it's aged me. Okay. I don't know what kind of filter we're dealing with here on Zoom, but like I'm telling you in real life, it's worse than this. And that's the worst symptom. My mother has aged me.
Well, brother, I got to tell you, thank you. We can't thank you enough. Can you let
Yeah.
people know how to find the Liberace of HR and the greatest, most empathetic, resilient, and kind of patient caregiver in the world? How can people find you?
I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. You could, I'm sure if you typed in Liberace of HR, I'll come up. Vadim Lieberman, Lib, not Lieb. I'm sure the spelling will be, within the podcast. Uh, uh, so find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. Basic Trash NY is my Instagram
But
handle.
say that
Um,
again.
there you
Basic
go.
trash NY.
Yeah, NY, New York, right? Basic
But
Trash
yeah.
NY. It'll all make sense when you see my Instagram. And go to vadimlieberman.com. You'll see my talks there. You'll see some blogs that I haven't updated in the longest time because I'm lazy. But yeah, come find me, connect with me, on LinkedIn, send me a message. Happy to connect, share tips, or just commiserate.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, buddy. You rock.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
you.
Thank
you
you.
both.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great.